Lately, we've started receiving stories from listeners all around the world, stories that aren't easily explained, that linger long after the lights are turned off. Tonight, we've chosen two particularly curious and unsettling tales for you. Both come directly from listeners who encountered something unforgettable in haunted houses deep within Japan. In Kyoto, there's a house where a woman's quiet weeping hasn't stopped for decades, and locals refuse even to whisper its name. Then, hidden among the forested hills of Gifu, a mansion filled with antique dolls seems frozen in time, until you realize one of them is quietly following you. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and get comfortable, because tonight, together, we're stepping into places that never quite let their visitors leave. Are you ready? Then let's begin. Every city has that one house. You know the one. Hidden behind trees, forgotten at the end of some silent street. The kind of place that people whisper about, but never actually enter. Kyoto had such a place, and according to the listener who sent us this story, it was a house that even the bravest wouldn't visit after midnight. Our listener signed his message simply as Shinji. He explained that he wasn't a believer in spirits or curses. He was a rational guy, someone who enjoyed exploring abandoned locations for photography. But there was something about the stories of this particular house that drew him in. It wasn't curiosity, not exactly. It was more like a quiet challenge. Could he really stand there inside that place and feel nothing? The house in question was known locally as Naku Ona no Ie, the House of the Weeping Woman. It sat in one of the oldest neighborhoods in Kyoto, obscured by tall bamboo and thick vines that had grown unchecked for decades. The history of the house was vague, stitched together from half-truths and fragments of neighborhood gossip. The story, at its heart, was simple. A woman had lived there once upon a time with her young daughter. Her husband vanished under mysterious circumstances. Some whispered he fled in shame, others suggested darker fates. One thing, though, was certain. On a night no one could pinpoint exactly, neighbors were startled awake by the sound of a woman's screams. Authorities arrived to find her sitting silently, rocking on the floor, holding tightly to an empty blanket. The child was nowhere to be found. She never spoke again, and eventually vanished into some institution. The house was boarded up and forgotten, but not entirely forgotten. Decades passed. Residents nearby still whispered about hearing a soft, gentle weeping that began precisely at 2:07 a.m. every night. It wasn't loud, wasn't desperate. It was simply consistent. Shinji, intrigued but skeptical, decided it was exactly the type of story he needed to disprove. A myth, a superstition, a trick of the imagination born from collective fear. On a cold November evening, armed with his camera, flashlight, and an audio recorder, he finally visited the property. It was around midnight when he arrived, and from the moment he stepped onto the grounds, he felt a quiet sense of disorientation. The path leading up to the house was almost invisible, covered in fallen leaves and encroached upon by thick foliage. The air was cool, silent, too silent, he later reflected. When he first entered the house, something immediately struck him as strange. The sliding doors opened with unnerving ease. Inside, the interior was oddly pristine, devoid of the expected layers of dust or the musty smell of decay. Instead, it felt as though the house had been preserved, trapped at the moment it had been left behind. The furniture stood intact, a teacup still placed neatly on the table, curtains hanging perfectly still. It was unsettling, as if the house had simply paused. He checked his watch. Exactly 2:05 a.m. For a moment he thought of leaving, but then a quiet determination overtook him. He set up his audio recorder on the floor, turned on his flashlight, and decided to wait. At precisely 2:07 a.m. it started. A gentle, mournful cry broke the silence. Soft at first, so faint he initially questioned if it was just the wind filtering through cracks in the wood. But it steadily became clearer, closer, unmistakably human. The sound was delicate, heartbreakingly sad. Like someone weeping privately, unaware they were being overheard. Shinji's pulse quickened as he stood, attempting to pinpoint the exact location of the sound. He moved slowly, flashlight shaking slightly in his grip. The crying seemed to drift through the house, elusive, impossible to trace to a single room. Every step he took felt heavier than the last, his chest tightening under the weight of an unexplainable dread. The logical part of his mind desperately sought explanations. An animal trapped somewhere, pipes expanding in the cold night, anything to rationalize what he was hearing. He followed the crying to the staircase, where the wooden steps ascended into darkness. The sobbing seemed clearer upstairs, a painful pull guiding him upward. As he placed his foot on the first step, the crying ceased abruptly, plunging the house into oppressive silence. The silence seemed deafening now, the house waiting patiently. Just when he considered retreating, a faint creak echoed behind him at the base of the stairs. He spun around, flashlight beam slicing the darkness. Nothing was there, but as the beam flickered briefly, for just a split second, he saw it. A figure standing silently, facing away from him in the shadows near the front door. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it vanished into the darkness once more. Shinji stood motionless, a cold fear rooting him in place. He knew then he was no longer alone. He pressed stop on the recorder, breathing hard. He left shortly afterward, his mind racing with what he'd just experienced. Yet something inside him whispered he wasn't done with this house. Not yet. Not until he understood exactly what he'd witnessed. And so the following day he returned. Shinji couldn't shake off the feeling that had lingered after that night. The woman's quiet sobs echoed in his memory, impossible to dismiss as mere imagination. He knew he had to learn more, to dig deeper, and that meant returning, though this time under the safety of daylight. The next morning he walked back to the quiet neighborhood. Under sunlight, the house looked different, smaller, more vulnerable somehow. But the unease that had gripped him the night before still lingered. It seemed like the whole neighborhood shared that unease. As Shinji approached neighboring houses, people glanced at him nervously from behind curtains, quickly turning away whenever he waved. It felt as if he had stepped into a forbidden territory where questions were neither welcome nor answered. Knocking on doors yielded nothing but silence or curt refusals. The locals clearly didn't want to discuss the house, let alone the stories that surrounded it. One woman simply shook her head sharply, eyes fearful, murmuring politely but firmly, "I'm sorry, I can't help you," before quickly shutting her door. Frustration building, Shinji was about to give up when a soft, gravelly voice called to him from a nearby porch. "You won't find what you're looking for asking them," the voice said quietly. Turning, Shinji saw an elderly man sitting in an old wooden chair, eyes half hidden beneath the brim of his worn straw hat. His face was deeply lined, evidence of the many years he'd spent watching this street. "Please," Shinji said, approaching carefully, respectful yet hopeful. "Do you know something about that house?" The old man gestured weakly, inviting Shinji closer. "I know too much," he said quietly, "more than I'd like." Shinji sat on the porch step, his heart quickening slightly. "Please tell me. I need to know the truth." The elderly man paused, as if considering whether to speak at all. Finally, he exhaled deeply and began, his voice slow, heavy with years of suppressed memories. "The woman who lived there, her name was Miyuki. She was gentle, quiet. I remember her husband. He disappeared one night without explanation. After he was gone, Miyuki began to change. She never spoke much to anyone, kept to herself, rarely left the house. And her daughter? Nobody ever saw that little girl again either." Shinji listened carefully, sensing there was more the old man wasn't saying. "And the crying? The sounds people hear at night?" The old man nodded slowly, sadness clouding his gaze. "That began after Miyuki passed away. She died quietly, alone in that house, forgotten by most of us. It was weeks before anyone found her, but by then everyone in this neighborhood knew she hadn't really left. The crying, that's her. I've heard it myself. Every night, always at the same time. Exactly 2:07 a.m. But why is the house still abandoned after all these years? Shinji asked. Couldn't someone have bought it, renovated it? The elderly man chuckled bitterly, shaking his head. In Japan, we have a law. Realtors must tell potential buyers about the home's history, especially when someone has died there, especially when people claim the place is haunted. So the house sits there, untouched, unsold. Who would buy a home that still carries so much sadness, so much unresolved pain? A heavy silence settled between them. Shinji understood the old man's words clearly, yet his curiosity burned even brighter. He still had unanswered questions. Did anyone ever see her after she died, or was it always just the crying? Nobody here dares look closely, the old man replied, his voice dropping even lower. They're afraid of what they might see. Some places, some memories, they're better left undisturbed. Shinji sat quietly, absorbing everything he'd heard. The old man's story matched exactly what he'd experienced. The feeling of sorrow that hung in the air, the quiet desperation in the woman's sobs. Yet there was still one question that lingered, a question he barely had the courage to ask. What happened to her daughter? The old man's eyes met his directly for the first time, and Shinji saw the genuine sorrow reflected there. That's the one thing nobody knows. After Miyuki died, the authorities searched every corner of the house, every street nearby. They found nothing. Some think she might have been taken, others think something far darker occurred. The man leaned in slightly, his voice nearly a whisper. But sometimes, late at night, when the crying is at its quietest, I swear you can hear something else. Another voice, younger, calling softly, but it never lasts. A chill ran through Shinji as the weight of the old man's words sank in. He knew he had touched something deeper, something painful and real. He stood, offering a grateful bow. "Thank you," Shinji said softly, truly meaning it. "Thank you for trusting me with your story." The old man gave a weary nod, eyes returning to the distant, abandoned house. Be careful, young man. Not all stories are meant to be uncovered. Sometimes they're meant to remain exactly where they are, in the shadows. You'd be surprised how many homes in Japan are left behind, sealed in time like glass jars filled with forgotten memories. Some become museums, others slowly rot into the earth, and then there are those few that remain almost too perfect. Almost like someone or something is still tending to them. This next story came to me from a couple who run a YouTube channel. Their names are Liam and Naomi. They've been exploring rural ruins for years. Old bathhouses, empty schools, forgotten ryokans. But the place they told me about, this one stayed with them. Not because of what they saw, but because of what followed. The house was in the hills of Gifu Prefecture, a region known for its beauty, its forests, and occasionally for the things people tried to forget. They were tipped off by a follower who said, "Check out the red-roofed mansion near Takayama. No one's lived there for decades, but the dolls are still looking at the door." Naturally, that kind of comment got their attention. When they arrived, the house stood at the edge of a forest. Tall, narrow, with warped wood siding and a moss-covered stone path leading to the entrance. It was surrounded by silence. No animals, no wind, just an old red torii gate half collapsed in the undergrowth. The front door wasn't locked. They stepped inside, expecting dust, maybe decay, but what greeted them was unsettlingly clean. The floors intact, shoji doors unbroken, everything preserved, like the house had simply frozen. Their camera rolled as they moved through the first hallway, their voices quiet, even playful at first, but that changed once they reached the first room. It was filled wall to wall with dolls, traditional Japanese dolls, ningyo. Some ornate, others simple. They were placed carefully on wooden stands, seated in precise rows, hair perfectly combed, kimonos unstained. All of them faced the door. Liam joked about it on camera. "Well, this room definitely has a vibe, like they've been waiting." Naomi laughed nervously, but she said later something in her stomach turned the moment she stepped in. It wasn't just how many dolls there were, it was how still they were. As if they weren't resting, as if they were watching. They found 3 more rooms like that, one with only glass-eyed Ichimatsu dolls, another filled with protective Fuda talismans pinned above shelves. One was themed entirely with local festival figures, some of them life-sized. The deeper they went, the more obsessive the layout became. The dolls weren't placed randomly, they were curated. Perfect angles, equal spacing, every face aimed at whoever entered. Like the rooms weren't meant to display them, but to trap you with their gaze. Upstairs, the wooden steps groaned, unlike the rest of the house, and Naomi mentioned feeling a cold draft brush past her shoulder even though no windows were open. At the top of the stairs was a door unlike the others, dark red with a tarnished brass plaque bolted near the top. The plaque read, 1,000. The doorknob wouldn't turn. They recorded footage of the hallway, zooming in on the plaque. Liam commented, "Guess this is where the serious collection lives." But Naomi said she didn't like being near that door. She couldn't explain why, just that her chest felt tight. They explored a few more rooms on that floor. At one point, Naomi heard something behind her. Small footsteps, quick and light, like a child dashing barefoot across the floor. She spun around. Nothing. Liam thought it was just the house creaking, but when they reviewed the footage later, the microphone did pick up something. Not quite footsteps, not quite wood shifting, more like something scurrying between the walls. Still, they pressed on, making their way back downstairs to wrap up. Naomi took one last shot of the main room, where all the dolls still sat. Still watching, still silent. Before they left, Liam did something that Naomi didn't like. He looked straight at one of the dolls in the center and whispered, "I wonder which one of you is the 1,000th. They both laughed a little, nervous energy. But Naomi said later, when he said that, she thought she saw a slight twitch in one of the doll's shoulders, like the smallest shift of fabric, like something had heard him. They left quickly after that. At first, it all felt like just another successful explore. But that changed when they got home and reviewed the footage. And that's when the real story began. Some places don't reveal their secrets right away. They wait. They let you feel safe, let you laugh a little, make jokes, take your pictures, and then they follow you home. Naomi said the feeling hit her as soon as they stepped outside. The sunlight felt warmer, the wind returned. For the first time in hours, the silence broke. Birds were chirping. She didn't say anything to Liam at first. She didn't want to sound dramatic, but something about that final room, the one with the plaque reading 1,000, it stayed in her chest. A pressure, like she hadn't really left it. They packed up, drove to their hotel, and crashed for the night. But Naomi admitted later she couldn't sleep well. She kept replaying a moment in her head, one she didn't even mention on camera. While filming in the main room just before they left, she swore she saw one of the dolls move. Not a lot. Not like a horror movie jump scare, just a small turn of the head. So small she couldn't tell if it was real or her mind playing tricks. It was the kind of moment you talk yourself out of immediately. You blink, shake it off, pretend it was your own movement or the angle of the light. but the feeling didn't go away. Back home a few days later, they sat down to edit the footage, their usual process: sync audio, overlay the B-roll, adjust brightness, cut the shaky bits. At first everything looked fine. The house was as eerie on screen as it had felt in person. Dolls lined up, shadows stretching across the rooms, and that weird echo in every hallway. Then, around the 28-minute mark, Naomi paused the video. "Wait," she said. "Go back." Liam rewound 5 seconds. There, in the background of a shot from the glass doll room just behind Naomi's shoulder, was a single doll standing near the door. But Naomi hadn't entered that room. She was in the hallway. The doll was on the inside, visible through the slightly open shoji screen. They played it again, then went back to earlier footage of that room, before Naomi ever stood near it. The doll wasn't there. They checked the next room, another wide shot. The same doll again, this time seated on a small stool near the center of the frame. But neither of them remembered seeing her. They began to scrub through more clips, slowly, carefully, and there she was, over and over, in 4 different rooms. Sometimes near a wall, sometimes closer to the camera, always just behind them, always facing forward, always alone. Same outfit, same painted smile, same dull, glassy stare. The odd part was, none of the dolls they remembered filming had that face. Naomi leaned closer to the screen. "That's not one of the ones we saw," she said. Liam agreed. They'd commented on so many, pointed out their outfits, the arrangement, even made jokes, but never once had either of them mentioned this one. And then came the audio. They always recorded ambient sound with a secondary mic, just in case. As Liam cleaned up background noise from one clip, he noticed a strange pattern. Soft static, followed by a sound wave spike right after Liam made his thousandth doll joke. They isolated the spike and boosted the volume. It was a voice, a faint, breathy whisper in Japanese. They ran it through a transcription tool. The result was fragmented, but one phrase repeated twice. "Watashi wa koko ni iru." I'm here. Liam went pale. Naomi didn't speak. They checked the original footage again. That moment had been totally silent. No whispers, no ambient change. That voice, whatever it was, had only been picked up by the equipment. The next day, Liam tried to load the files again, but something had changed. Every clip featuring the doll, the one that kept showing up, refused to open. The thumbnails were black, the previews glitched. When he tried to copy them to a hard drive, the transfer stopped halfway. Then, one by one, the files began to vanish. No error messages, no corrupted folders, just gone. The only thing that remained was a still frame Naomi had saved as a reference for color grading. She'd left it on her desktop. It was a wide shot of the main room, and in the corner near the base of a shelf stood that same doll. But this time, she was looking straight at the lens. Naomi begged Liam not to go back. And he didn't. They never uploaded the video, never spoke about the house again on their channel. The story reached me only because a friend of theirs forwarded the email. No return address, no subject line. Just one sentence typed at the top of the message. Some dolls aren't meant to be found.
And now, we leave these stories with you. Tell us, have you ever felt watched in a place that should have been empty? And if so, would you ever go back? Also, if you've had a chilling experience of your own, we want to hear from you. Visit our brand new website, gordon.com, and send us your own true horror story. Who knows, maybe our next video will feature your experience. The link is waiting for you in the description. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, don't miss our previous video, Lost in the Mirror Maze, where an innocent childhood visit to a carnival attraction turned into a lifelong nightmare. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now, and we'll see you there. Until next time, sleep tight.